Welcome to Ethics Matter. I'm Magali Laguerre-Wilkinson, and joining us today is Robert Bank, who's CEO and President of American Jewish World Service, which works to end poverty in the developing world and support human rights. Mr. Bank has made it his life's work to combat just those things, and he joins us today to tell us a little bit more about that. Robert Bank, welcome to Ethics Matter. Thank you so much for being here.
Magali, it's a delight to be here, and please do call me Robert.
Of course, thank you, Robert. So, Robert, you're a native of South Africa.
Yes.
Having grown up in Apartheid-era South Africa, what brought you to do what you do today?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Magali, and clearly everything that I experienced growing up in South Africa brought me to what I was doing even prior to what I'm doing now and what I'm doing now as the CEO of American Jewish World Service. So, you know, I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa in the 60s and 70s. Cape Town, by the Group Areas Act, a hellacious, heinous part of the legislation of South Africa, was restricted only to white people. But there were African black people and so-called colored people in South Africa, and Indian people, and Malay people, and a diverse, beautiful community that actually lived in Cape Town. So I experienced as a child brutal police action against people of color who were not allowed to live in that city, although their livelihoods and their lives were in that city. And as a child, I observed literally people being clubbed, pushed into the back of police cars. And between the ages of whatever it was, you know, anything from 5 to 12 years old, you observe something like this and it is shocking. You don't understand why people are being treated with such violence. Also, I was very fortunate to be brought up in a progressive Jewish family where my parents and others were fighting apartheid, were very supportive of those who were trying to support the African National Congress, those who were fighting for freedom, for the right to vote. Let's remember that there were 5 million white people in South Africa and probably anywhere from 20 to 30 million black people. Not one of those people had the right to choose anything about their lives by being able to vote in an election.
You know, even hearing this today and knowing the history, we've seen footage, we've seen films, we know about Nelson Mandela, but hearing it is still unimaginable. You said that you grew up in a progressive household, but you also had family members, and one particular family member who was very involved with Nelson Mandela, who fought with him side by side. Explain a little bit what you witnessed and who this person was.
Yeah, well, this person is a cousin in my family, and he was in what was called the Rivonia trial, which was a trial held in 1964 in South Africa where the defendants were charged with sabotage and treason. And as a young person, knowing that in fact sabotage and treason actually meant freedom, and that was explained to me, was very, very powerful for me, and is very true in my work today. Recognizing that when people who are protesting are shot in the streets, it depends, right, which side you're on about what is liberty and what is authoritarianism. So I think it's very apt many, many years later to the kind of work that I'm leading at American Jewish World Service today.
You know, so let's jump ahead a little bit. You decide to come to the United States to escape military service in South Africa. And so you're coming to this beacon of freedom here. And yet you arrive and you have a completely different experience. What was that like?
Well, I think one of the things about being an immigrant, especially if you're fleeing from a country that is a dictatorship, a country that is persecuting its own people, is that while you might know that there is no perfect country in the world, you certainly hope that the values that America stands for will shine brightly. And I do have enormous faith in America today, and always have. However, it was quite shocking as a 17-year-old to come to the United States and discover that, of course, the history of slavery, the deep-rooted racism in America today is very, very much with us. And I had a first-hand experience, I have to say, about this, because My first career was studying music at the Juilliard School, which is, as some people know, on 66th Street and Broadway in New York City.
Very prestigious, of course.
Yes, connected to Lincoln Center, etc. And, you know, it's one part of the world. And I decided to participate in something called the Lincoln Center Institute, which really was a pull for me. And I think that also lent back to my South African roots, to introduce the performing arts to underserved communities in the broader New York City environment. And I would travel to parts of New York City that I had never traveled to before. In the Bronx, in Brooklyn, in Queens, where I met the most wonderful people who were subject to the worst of public education. And it was actually quite shocking to see that in the United States of America, a country that I thought was so much more advanced than where I came from, that the education was so subpar.
What did you, can you remember a couple of experiences, things that stick out for you where you thought to yourself, what is going on here?
Yes, I remember very distinctly an experience in the Bronx where I was invited to play for the students. The piano, when I arrived, had paint all over the keys, wet paint. The headmaster couldn't control the students, and the way the headmaster was trying to control the students was so inappropriate. When I walked into the school, I felt as if I was going into a prison to be checked for guns, etc. So, you know, always my question is sort of what's at the root of this problem, right? And that was always my question. From, you know, I can trace it right back to what I was talking about earlier, when I would see one group of people incarcerating another group of people. And I would ask, you know, as Martin Luther King did in a beautiful statement, you know, when you throw a coin at the beggar, let's ask what is the edifice that gave rise to us needing to throw the coin at the beggar, right? So for me, always there was an intrinsic, deep questioning around why is society like this? It doesn't need to be like this. There's certainly enough to go around. And what are we going to do about it?
Well, questioning yourself, posing that question to yourself can make you go in either direction. Either you want to take it on head on, or you run in the other direction and you say this is someone else's problem. But you decided to take something like this head on, and you ended up going to law school. So, and why was that? Was it because of what you saw that led you to do this? And what would that work be as a lawyer?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that. You know, as you were asking that, Magali, I was thinking that our lives are comprised of so many different pieces. Another thing that always inspired me towards working in the area of social justice was that growing up in South Africa and observing this enormous racism and discrimination and persecution of other people simply because of the color of their skin was also very powerful for me, because I myself felt other growing up, because I knew very young that I was gay. And to be gay in the context in which I grew up, in a Jewish family in Cape Town, South Africa at that time in the 70s, was almost like the idea of telling someone that I was having those feelings was frankly almost like thinking that I could fly to the moon. It was so outside of my consciousness and my ability. And I think about that a lot in my work today, because I think, you know, that another person might have had that ability or that agency or that potential had they had the support to actually believe that they had the right to be who they wanted to be. And I can take myself as a young kid right now to Rajasthan, to rural Rajasthan in India, where we work at American Jewish World Service, and I actually can identify in some ways with a young girl who's 12 years old, who there's a piece of her that knows that the man who is 15, who is being brought to my house by my parents this afternoon in order for me to be married, that's not what I want to do.
That's not who I am.
That's not who I am. I want to finish my schooling. I want to be able to have a career. I want to be able to have choices about when and who I will marry at some point. But without support, that kind of self-realization or that kind of agency or empowerment is not allowed to happen. So that was a long way of saying that when I came around to really wanting to, based on all the experiences I had, especially this last one I was talking about with underserved people in New York City, I very much wanted to do law with a focus on social justice. And I saw law as a way to really make change, because I now learned enough about the United States to realize that the way to really make change happen is to change policies and laws. And then after that, of course, we need to change hearts and minds, which is probably the harder piece. But it is always useful and most important to have laws in place.
You know, you mentioned hearts and minds, and you've said your life's work today is to change hearts and minds. But it's about also injecting yourself in places with differing points of view. Why do you want to subject yourself to that?
I don't see it as a choice, actually. I just feel it instinctively and deeply. But why do I want to do it intellectually? Because I see such potential. Because I'm a lover of people. I'm actually a victim of the human potential movement, as someone once said to me, a wonderful consultant that I worked with. I really do believe that, you know, talent is universal, opportunity is not. That has been said often. I travel all over the developing world in my role as the CEO of American Jewish World Service, and I meet the most incredible activists who believe in themselves and who lead others in their community to make change. And I see the results of that change, and that just simply makes me very happy. It's as simple as that. I love seeing social change in operation.
You know, you talked about the little girl in Rajasthan. You've done a lot of work in India. And you see some of yourself in these experiences going to these places. How do you effectively make change in cultures where these norms are so embedded, they're so ingrained? Of course, it's, you know, if there's the cynic in me that says, well, you know, Robert, you show up and you have all these plans, but you're going to get on your plane and leave tomorrow. How do you maintain that? How does that stay?
Well, Magali, that's exactly the right question to what I will give you as our answer, which is, I don't actually believe I have the power to do anything. What I have the power is to lead an amazing organization in the United States of America that is supported by an incredible group of progressive people, tens and thousands of people who believe in our approach to social change. And we have a very specific approach to social change, which has got nothing to do with Robert or anyone else floating in and flying from above, top down, into whether it's Rajasthan or Nairobi or the rural villages outside of Port-au-Prince. Our philosophy is that local people actually have the answers to the problems that they are faced with. And we see this over and over again. And the founders of American Jewish World Service in 1985, a Jewish philanthropist named Larry Phillips and an expert international aid worker named Larry Simon, had from the very beginning a vision. And they said that American Jews have been involved in philanthropy, in the building of social movements in America for many years, starting with the labor movement, with Julius Rosenwald many, many years ago in the South, building schools, supporting education for African American people in the United States. They were involved in the women's movement. They were involved later in the LGBT movement. So let's build on this, this generous idea. Let's build on this Jewish value and teaching of tikkun olam, meaning repair the world. And let's actually find in local communities talented leaders who themselves believe that that young girl in Rajasthan should not be married at such a young age for very obvious reasons, because her life will essentially end. She will start having children at a young age. She will potentially die during childbirth. She will, if that happens, of course, she won't have all those other opportunities of getting education, etc. So our belief is that in every country we are able to find people themselves who do not believe that the social norms in their country are necessarily the ones that are most healthy for their citizens. We would never go into a country and say, you know, child marriage bad.
Yeah.
White man from north coming to tell you that. You know what I'm saying? It's just so not our approach. And so let me just tell you a story about one that I'm so proud of a grantee that we do support. This is actually in Pune in Western India. It is called Kashtakari Panchayat. And Kashtakari Panchayat is basically a group that's an organization that supports women who are working in garbage. They are working amidst garbage. They are working in mounds and mounds of garbage and scrap and sorting it out so that they can sell pieces of it to be reused, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a horrible job, very hard job, unfathomable. And this particular woman that this organization helped is called Reka. Reka was married at 12. She had her first child at 13. She obviously couldn't get an education. She was both child rearing as well as working all day in this garbage dump, essentially. But today, with the help of this amazing organization that is working to support Reka about how to access education for her daughters, how to advocate to local officials that her daughters should have a better life than she has, how to be educated about the fact that her daughters don't have to be married at the age of 12. And just the most beautiful story is that this particular woman, Reka, she has 3 daughters. One is training to become an engineer. And the 2 others, one is finishing middle school and one is finishing high school. That's what really just gives me joy, because it is enabling someone to give their children something better than they had the opportunity to have. And that's what American Jewish World Service believes in. And that's because we find leaders in communities to do this. And the way we find them is, again, not top down. The way we find them is that we spend a lot of time with local people in India or Haiti or Kenya who are leaders, who are experts in the field of social change, in the field of social norm change. And we work with them and partner with them, and then they accompany the organizations that we fund. So really this is very much about sort of a deep partnership between the North and the South, and I would say accompaniment and solidarity. And we always start at the grassroots, because we believe that's where change starts from, and that's where real people live. As individuals in a society, sort of grasping for their human rights. There's a beautiful quote by Eleanor Roosevelt in which she says, "Where do universal human rights begin? They begin in small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world." And this is the world of the individual human being. So this is the world of Reka and her daughter, the engineer, and her other 2 daughters. Whatever they do, they will not be sitting in garbage all day. And their mother is so proud of them, as am I.
That's extraordinary. I want to go back into your resume a little bit, because you were very involved as well with the gay men's health crisis.
Yes.
And as we see here, and which is a human right in the world, LGBT rights are also at risk in many countries in Africa, in India, all over the world. And you've worked in Uganda in particular.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit what is at risk for these populations now, and what work is the American Jewish World Service doing to address and help these groups?
Well, thank you so much for asking about this, because it is one of the key areas in which we work. We work to stop violence against women, girls, and LGBT people in developing countries. And Uganda has been brought to the fore over the past many years because of the draconian anti-homosexuality act that was about to be passed, then was passed, and all of us have been following that with horror. We have supported local leaders, experts in the field in Uganda, who have fought against this abhorrent persecution and discrimination against sexual minorities in Uganda. And I'd like to tell you very specifically about a grantee that AJWS supported. The organization is called Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is a part of the Ugandan constitution that actually stands for the rights of people to be free and to associate. And the organization was started by a gentleman by the name of Nicholas Opio. Nicholas Opio, together with many other organizations, worked very, very hard in coalition to fight for the human rights of LGBT people in Uganda. And in 2014, they were successful, due to the funding of AJWS and others, to overturn that draconian law. And they overturned it on a technicality, which means they didn't change the hearts and minds necessarily of the legislature or the parliament, but that law is no longer in effect. Are there potentially attempts to resuscitate that law? There always will be. Will we be always proactive and relentless in stopping it from re-emerging? Will we challenge it again if it comes up? We will, in partnership with these leaders in Uganda. So while the situation there, again, Magali, is difficult, is hard. I've been in Uganda recently, met with one of the leading groups there that we also fund, called the Human Rights Promotion Forum. Another remarkable man called Adrian Juko, who leads this organization. And when we were visiting, unfortunately, what happened was that the day after, just completely by coincidence, we heard that one of their wonderful young paralegal men was followed home from work, pushed into his home, attacked, raped, and all of his machinery from his work was stolen. So we immediately jumped in with those that we know in country and our amazing in-country staff person, and supported this young man and supported the organization. So this sort of is a little bit the course of business, doing business in the human rights field. You know, when you're working with human rights defenders who are people who stand on pedestals for me, I mean, they are people who every single day risk their lives to protect others. And what's particularly, I will say, moving about the two gentlemen that I've just been talking about, Nicholas Opio and Adrian Juko, is that actually both of them are straight. And they are committed to fighting for LGBT rights. Adrian says it so beautifully when he says, I do not want my two daughters to grow up in a country where one group of people is persecuted.
I didn't know you were going to end the story that way. That's really extraordinary. Speaking of Uganda, the churches, the Christian churches there, and yes. I'm not going to ask you to tell you to pick on one or anything like that, but it seems as though the clergy has been incredibly silent regarding LGBT rights. Does your organization work with local clergy, with churches, to try to see how people can be protected? And it just seems so anti-Christian, frankly, to support so much hate.
Yeah. Thank you for asking about this. I would like to sort of say another thing about the churches in Uganda, that many of them have been inspired to hate for two reasons, one of which directly relates to the church and another just relates to colonialism. So, because I always like to look at the root causes of everything, you'll begin to realize.
Yes.
So there's a gentleman called Scott Lively who lives in Massachusetts, who is someone who in the early parts of the 2000s of the 21st century became determined to transport homophobia from the United States of America through the evangelical church to African countries. And this is very, very well documented. So part of the enormous discrimination against LGBT people in Uganda comes specifically from our country. So I did want to sort of just highlight that. And we have supported a case that was brought against this gentleman on behalf of Ugandans to actually stop this kind of hatred from continuing. So that's one thing I want to say. Another thing that I want to say is that, and I think it's quite interesting that there's a lot of attention being paid recently to the fact that many of the laws that penalized LGBT people, that criminalized same-sex activity in Africa, actually came from the British or came from the colonization that occurred in Africa. And those laws were in the penal code of those countries and were sort of very much propagated by those who weren't local Africans. So I just want to always also give that context.
Of course.
Now I want to say that it is also true that churches in places like Uganda and churches all over the world and parts of denominations of all religions have tended to be very, very homophobic, very, very not in support of gender equality, not in support of rights for all. And this is something we work on all the time, and we work on it in two contexts. In country in Uganda, we work on it by funding organizations that themselves are engaging with clergy, realizing that clergy will be a stepping stone. If you can change the hearts and minds of someone who works as someone of the cloth, who has so much power in their community, then surely they will speak to their people. So this is always a model of work for us, and we support organizations that have actually been quite successful. We have a wonderful story, actually, not in Uganda, but in Kenya, of an amazing woman, a lesbian woman, who worked in an organization called PEMA Kenya, and she worked with clergy with herself and a bunch of other LGBT people, and said they wanted to talk about problems in their community and solving problems, not LGBT problems, problems about access to healthcare, problems about police violence.
Starting small.
Starting small. And apparently it's a technique that for apparently for about 3 months they would come together and they would work on these things, and whenever the clergy might say something like, oh, those gay people, they should be killed, they would remain silent. They wouldn't come out. And after getting to know these people, and this is sort of going back to our discussion about changing hearts and minds,
right,
because I'm a strong believer in this approach. And so somewhere about 3 months into this incredible work they were doing together to build community, the next time someone made a homophobic comment, Essie, the leader of this organization, said, I'm a lesbian. And of course, her new friends,
right, she'd established a friendship with them, so
right,
already
were shocked. You
right.
Can't be.
Yeah.
You can't be. Those people are evil people. Those people are predators. Those people, all of the cliches and the stereotypes. And in fact, this is, I think, what is one of the most promising interventions in the world, right? This notion that one meets another human being and then realizes that, in fact, we've got so much in common.
Because we're part of this community.
Yeah.
We have the same
Right.
problems. We have the same issues.
Right. So I'm seeing a lot of hope. I want to talk about another way that AJWS
Yes.
really works in the multi-faith
Yes,
or
of course.
interfaith community. As a Jewish organization, we obviously believe that, and with our premise being that all people are born equal and entitled to the same rights and dignity, we work across faith. And we do a lot of work in the United States in our government affairs work in Washington, D.C., where we join with other progressive religious groups who are fighting for equality. And it's a wonderful sacred moment when together we go visit a senator in the United States Senate, and I'm accompanied by a rabbi and a priest and an imam. And there is a sense that, the world could all just work out if, all of us could understand that we really care about one another. I know that sounds somewhat Pollyanna-ish, but when it works, it works. And another thing, American Jewish World Service provides American Jews with this enormous platform for opening themselves to the possibility of understanding people who are different to them or come from different cultures. And when I travel with investors and philanthropists to developing world countries, and we come as a group of not only, but the majority, Jewish people, and we are in Hyderabad with a group of Muslim women and who are fighting domestic violence in their community and being given opportunities to have education, not get married young, etc.
You're showing up as a human helping another human being.
Exactly, and it's across faith, and it sets such a wonderful sort of moral example of what the world could be like.
You know, activists can make noise, but sometimes can't affect change. How are you able to be both activists and game changer?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. We don't like noise for noise's sake, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I think I think we like noise when it's going to really have an impact. And I do believe very strongly in advocacy, in speaking truth to power, in speaking truth to our government in the United States, in speaking truth through our grantees to their governments, and making noise, because one needs to make noise in order to be heard. There's no question. But I think I'm more interested on some level in the combination of that noise and what I would call quiet competence. The ability to really focus as the CEO of a social change organization in the United States that works in the developing world on what is the best way to make social change. What is the way to really build solidarity and partnership with people in local communities to enable them to move up the chain vertically? And let me explain what I mean by that. I think starting at the grassroots is the most important thing. I think it is always critical that local communities, people themselves, need to be given the opportunity to ask for and to understand their rights and what they are entitled to. I think that builds very robust and vibrant communities. But I'm thinking of a case of, for instance, in Haiti, where we, and I'm very proud of this, after the 2010 earthquake, American Jewish World Service was fortunate to have been supported by many of our donors who were, like everyone was at the time, just overwhelmed and shocked. 200,000 people dead.
It's devastating.
The
yes.
devastation of this catastrophe was so awful. And then later with Hurricane Matthew. So we have always decided that the way we are going to go into a country is only if the people in that country really want us and want us in a way that will have the best impact for them. We are not an organization that goes in and out. So we believe, so we had been in Haiti, working in Haiti, because it's a country that I love deeply, and it's a country that has immense possibility and some of the most beautiful people in the world.
I agree wholeheartedly, but go on.
And I think it's been subject to external forces, talking of root causes, that are appalling. And I'm not going to go into the history of Haiti because you know it and I know it, but enough said.
That's another broadcast.
That's another
yes.
broadcast. But when so we were working in Haiti since 1999, and then when the earthquake happened, what we wanted to do was to make sure that the grassroots groups that we worked with had the capacity to rebuild, had the capacity to work in their communities to become what they were before. So if we were reporting a group of women feminists, an amazing organization called SOFA with some of the leading feminists in the world today, we wanted to make sure that their building that had collapsed could be built. We wanted to make sure that their affiliates in other parts of the country where they would have health clinics would be able to be revived. So we followed their lead. We also now, in 2018,
right. 8 years after
in Haiti, are doing another whole piece of work following the lead of what's going on in Haiti right now. And that's what I call starting at the grassroots and sort of leading all the way up. So now what we're doing is we are working with an incredible organization called Collectif, and you'll forgive me because you can say this, I don't know if I can do it so well, Collectif Justice Min, which means, I believe, Justice in Mining Collective, or a collective of mining justice. And this is a remarkable group that I have visited twice. and they blow me away. I mean, some of the most talented people on the earth today who are doing what I call, and it sort of relates to my work at GMHC when I used to talk about prevention a lot, that prevention is the most important thing. They know that Canadian and American groups have been working with the World Bank to do mining in Haiti. Mining is one of the most destructive forces in the world today, especially when done badly. It forces people off their land, it poisons the water and the land, and people are cheated into giving up their land because with a promise of jobs and gold. This amazing group of, it's a coalition of many, many organizations, is smart enough to know that there must be other countries in Central America where mining has proliferated, and what have they done? Because mining is sort of at the beginning in Haiti.
Right.
And American Jewish World Service funded for the last 12 years organizations in El Salvador, a country of 6.3 million people, that over many, many years, starting at the grassroots, moving around different departments in the country, persuading the Roman Catholic Church to actually get involved in fighting for water over gold, was their moniker.
Clean water. Yeah.
Clean water over gold, because the cyanide that is used in metallic mining can cause serious illness and death, especially if done illegally and without close monitoring. This went all the way up to the highest legislature of El Salvador. In 2017, El Salvador, little El Salvador, became the first country in the world to ban metallic mining. So they chose water over gold.
Is that so?
This amazing Haitian group has decided that what they want to do is that they want to learn from the Salvadorans, who are now, we, American Jewish World Service, are enabling this partnership. What were the techniques you used? What were the advocacy skills you used? How did you persuade the local population, who actually sometimes is very attracted by the sort of offers of,
of course.
in a language that they sometimes don't understand, sign at the bottom, et cetera, et cetera. So, we're for inclusive development, not destructive development. And so I think this Haiti example of this amazing group, KJM, are one of my favorite grantees. I hate to say that because they're all my favorite, but they are certainly one of my favorite. Because I believe, I can see that 10 years from now, they will have achieved what the El Salvadoran brothers and sisters did. So that's very, very exciting to me. And it's a combination of fierce activism, speaking truth to power to the Haiti government, and saying they want to call for a complete review of everything that's going on, organizing skills up to the top, as well as a grassroots group that frankly is working day to day on cultivating crops, sharing seeds,
they're there.
Making sure that they have livelihoods. So I think it's very much both and I'm actually a strong believer in something I learned once very young in my career, was that service, providing service to people, plus advocacy equals change.
Of course, you're an advocate for social change. We understand that. It's not a one-size-fits-all model.
Absolutely.
And so every country you enter, every culture you're discovering, it's almost like the first day on the job for you in many ways, right? How do you mold social change in different societies, in different environments? What kind of a challenge is that for you?
Yeah, for me, Magali, this goes back to our approach, which is very much about trusting local communities and trusting local experts. So in each of the countries in which we work, and we spend a lot of time choosing these people, and actually quite remarkably, they seem to come to us, which is rather lovely. And it's another thing I think about, sort of this attraction of this model. People have been working for many, many years in improving the communities in which they live, or they're in their country and they love their country. And people who love their country want to see change in their country.
They don't want to leave their country.
They don't want to leave their country. So the people I've been talking about today actually are all supported through our staff that are in these countries. So in Haiti, we have 2 amazing staff members who are Haitian, who teach me all I need to know about their communities, and I trust them. Our organization trusts them, and because they've been committed. I was with, again, a group of donors in Haiti recently, and an amazing woman came to speak to us at dinner. They were talking about the challenge with the Haitian government and corruption and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Could be talking about many countries. And when this incredible woman finished speaking, this American gentleman from Newton, Massachusetts said, "I have one question for you." And she said, "What is that question?" And he said, "Why don't you run for president of Haiti?" You know, because she's been working in social change. She runs a group called GAR that is actually working right now with Dominicans of Haitian descent who are being sort of forced back into Haiti. We're doing a lot of work on that issue, this whole issue of statelessness and really the persecution by the Dominican government right now. And
what was her answer?
Her answer was, that's a great question. She said, like a true good activist, she said, "I would do it when there's enough wind behind me, because one person can't make this change. And you know, I'm working with building coalitions and, you know, just society within the communities that I work." Another big area that we work all over the world in places and spaces where we see the potential is with youth. I'm such a great believer in young people. And for instance, on the continent of Africa, something like 50% of the continent are below the age of 25. And we're working.
They can't be discounted for sure.
Yeah. And there's an amazing grantee that we support in Senegal called Yenamar, that you can say much better than I can. Yenamar.
We're fed up.
That's it. And they marshaled 300,000 young people in recent elections to oust the local president, who wanted to stay for many, many, many terms, with way beyond what the Constitution allowed. So, you know, I have a great, great belief in youth, and we support them, we learn from them. We don't only teach them, we learn from them. Yeah.
You know, you said something recently which stuck with me about your work, about your life's work, about the work of activism, of implementing social change, which was, even in the darkest times, the problems scream and the solutions whisper. Incredible.
I really think that's true. You know, I think that in life, there's the classic, you know, glass half full, glass half empty kind of thing. And there's I do love that. Someone told me that once, and I've loved repeating it. The problems scream and the solutions whisper. So therefore, we pay more attention to the problems. And what I'm all about is really finding those nuggets and those kernels of success and scaling them and building upon them and believing in them. And I believe that is one of my life and my sort of management philosophies, actually. I think it's true for the people who work at American Jewish World Service. You know, I'm only one person of a staff of 130 people. I have the most remarkable staff who work in the United States and all over the world, and they inspire me every day. And I think, you know, my job is to sort of, very much like a conductor of an orchestra in some way, is to ensure that every instrument has its beautiful voice heard, and that this melody is given the opportunity to sort of really soar. And I see that all over the world. So I am just the luckiest person on earth, because I see every single day the future. I see the possibilities for a better world.
On that note, Robert Bank, let's continue to see these possibilities and continued success in your work and in your travels, and perhaps we can have another conversation again very soon.
That would be delightful. Thank you so much, Magali. It truly has been a delight.
Thank you.